Well, good morning guys, I'm Tom from Avid and I'm here for 24 hours with the CARPology cameras. We're at Naseby Reservoir, we've got some lovely bright spring sunshine and hopefully we'll be showing you a little bit of big hit spring fishing. So without further ado, we can get the barrow around and get the brolly up. So first things first, we're in the swimmer in 6 and 7, which is down the narrower arm of Naseby now. There's a great big expanse of water over to my right, and this kind of bottlenecks all the fish in. It's probably 180 yards across, and the fish really love it in here when it's warm. So, I mean, the wind's not ideal, it's blowing the wrong way, but it is in our favour in the sense of it's lovely and mild. So, definitely think there'll be a few fish out there, and I think they'll certainly be up for a bit of a feed. Right, so first things first, my plan is to introduce a big hitter bait. There's a lot of fish in here. The aim of the game is trying to hold them, but first things first, I want to find a nice presentable area. Got some tree work on the far side, and they're probably about 5 or 6 foot of water, so I'm fairly confident the fish will like living in there this time of year. So just gonna get the lead out there on the marker rod, get my wraps and just check the spots nice and clean. When it comes to finding a spot, I want to find the cleanest bit of ground I can find, and it so happens out there against those trees is just really nice. I feel the bumps on the braid. It's actually some exposed gravel there, so I wouldn't all be surprised if that's caused by the fish. The bottom itself's mainly sand, so as I say, those exposed bits of gravel are often where the fish have recently been feeding. So out there against that tree line, looks like it's going to be a winner. When it comes to these reservoir carp, there's an awful lot of water out there, and ultimately you've got to attract them in and keep them there. So my approach is boilie based, but I'm using it in all different styles. Again, maximising the attraction and hopefully holding those fish when they get in the swim. So first things first are some whole baits. These are 15mm bug, as you can see, they're covered in liquids. Again, that's for maximum attraction. It's a warm day, the fish might be spending a lot of time off the bottom, and ultimately I want to draw them down. So got hemp oil on there, a bit of beta stim and a bit of matching food liquid again, so they're pumping out loads of attraction. Now again, these are quite large food items, so the fish will soon eat through these, and ultimately I'm confident that the bigger fish have much more of a preference to eating whole baits. So put a couple of scoops of 15mm in there. Again, they make up the mainstay of the mix. And next up, got some halved baits. Now, if you imagine a boilie is a kind of closed cell, if you like, and it's quite hard to get the liquids inside. When you chop them in half, it reveals the core, and it means they're drinking those liquids a lot better than those whole baits. So again, I'll probably put a couple of scoops of those in there. Again, these are a little bit bigger, and what that does, it bulks out your bait. It makes your boilies go a little bit further. Next up, something a little bit different. I've got some 8mm. Now, as you can see, probably got a kilo's worth there in the scoop, and that's an awful lot of baits. That'll be really good for holding the fish in your swim. And again, it'll get a bit of competitive feeding going. So again, a couple of scoops of those into the bucket. And lastly, I've got some broken baits. Again, you can see I've got some crumb in there, some quarters, even some baits that are down to dust. Again, this is really good for holding those liquids. Again, it'll keep those fish grubbing around when it's out there on the spot. So I'll have 2 scoops of that. Now, this might look like a lot of bait. I know we're in spring, and a lot of the time people are fishing singles. But as I say, I need to make a real attractive zone out there that's going to draw these fish in potentially from quite long distances. So get all that in the bucket and give it a stir around. And as you can see, there's a right mixture of bits and pieces in there. There's lots of solid food items, again, that are going to resist any attentions of roach, bream, any nuisance fish like that. But also there's an awful lot of attraction there. To maximise the attraction further, got some of the Hydrospod. Again, this is the matching bug. It's super thick, so it's going to get to the bottom. It's going to stick to those baits. And as you can see, that's super thick. And that's going to coat all that crumb and hopefully hydrate it so it hits the bottom a little bit easier. It's not really deep water, but I'm a little bit conscious a lot of the time when we're putting crumb out, it's drifting off the spot. So there's a good slug of that in there. And lastly, is some tiger nut extract. Now, I'm a real fan of tigers where they're allowed. On this venue, they're not. But the tiger nut extract's the next best thing. So once I can get into the bottle, again, you can see this is a real thick, creamy liquid again. Really thick, so it's going to stick to those baits and that crumb. Again, a nice slug of that. One thing it does do as well, those liquids are really dense. Fishing out there at 33.5 rod lengths in a big crosswind, that's all adding to the weight inside the spawn. It's going to fly nice and true, hit the water and open, and get to the bottom nice and fast. Again, we'll give that one last little stir. And as you can see, a pile of real sticky, smelly carp food, which is just what I want. A right mixture of sizes. Again, loads of attraction and plenty of food to hopefully hold those fish when they do turn up. Right, so that's the bait out there. I'll be honest, no matter where I'm fishing, whether the fish are quite naive or whether it's a really hard venue, I like to get my bait out. That's the mainstay of the noise. I like my bait to start doing its job when it's out in the pond. So as I say, with all those liquids, all that smell, hopefully that's drawing some fish in. So I'm a little quiet period now while I get the rods ready, sort some rigs, and then get the rigs out there, hopefully for those waiting carp. So when it comes to rig choice, regardless of where I'm going, I like to keep it nice and simple, and I've got a couple of tried and tested rigs that never let me down. So in this instance, I'm fishing out at range and I'm fishing on a clear bottom. So that means I want to fish a nice wafter hook bait. So starting with the hook bait there, I've got a 15mm bug wafter and I've got half a 12mm pop up on there. Now I'll do that for a number of reasons. First and foremost for a bit of colour, and second for a little bit of increased buoyancy. I've got a size 4 chod hook there, which is quite a big bit of metal. So a little bit of pop up on there means I can critically balance it in the edge and get it wafting perfectly just how I want it. Now the rig itself's tied D-rig style, as I say, to a size 4 chod hook, and the rig in total is probably about 8 inches. Now that's my go-to length. I see lots of guys using shorter rigs than that, but for me, particularly if I'm fishing for some slightly bigger fish, I think that little bit of extra length helps them hook them a little bit further back and get some better hook holds. Now the hook link material itself is some of our new outline fluoro soft in 25 pound. It's a perfect hybrid between stiff and supple. Got plenty of movement there, but it's not going to tangle and it's going to boom away from that lead every single time. Got a little sinker in the middle there again. If there's lots of turbulence out on the spot while the fish are feeding around, the hook link's going to stay nicely nailed to the floor and the fish isn't going to get foul hooked or anything like that. Got a loop at the end onto a size 11 quick change swivel with a little micro anti-tangle sleeve on there. Again, I like the movement it offers, and ultimately I can change my hook links nice and quickly. Now leader wise, I'm using a helicopter setup, and for me, whenever I'm using this sort of rig presentation, I'm always going to a helicopter. Particularly in this instance, I'm fishing at 33 rod length, so it's a decent chuck in a crosswind. So again, it flies nice and true, and it means I'm not going to get any tangles. I've got a 4-ounce extremity lead on there, again, just to help with getting out there. I can tighten right down to it. I'm fishing up to some snags, so I want a nice bowstring tight line. Got a little lead core chod bead set up there again, probably about 2.5 inches of movement, just enough to mean the rig's got that movement if the lead's landing anything soft. But as I say, after plumbing around, I've found out it's nice and hard. And if I'm honest, I could move that down a little bit more if I wanted to. I've got that set up on about 75 centimetres for our 50 pound unleaded pin down. It's lovely and thin, so it's nice and safe. If you get cut off or crack off, those beads are going to slide off the end nice and easy. It's not as heavy as lead core, so again, it's great when you're fishing at extreme range like we are today. And again, it's super supple, so it's going to contour to the bottom nicely over that gravel out there. Now on the reel, I've got 12 pound outline camo reel line. It's 0.31, so again, it's perfect for fishing at range. It's nice and thin, but at the same time, I don't want to fish anything stupidly thin because there is a little bit of tree work out there. You'll see I've got a 50 pound Shoctite leader on there again. I've got about 24 foot of that. So again, I'm not going to crack off when I cast out, and it's just a little bit more peace of mind out against that tree work on the far side. So the rigs and the bits of terminal I'm using, hopefully we'll be showing you on in a carp's mouth shortly. Right, so it's been a quiet few hours. I'm conscious there's an awful lot of fishing here, so I don't think they're here at the moment, so I'm going to take the opportunity, get the rods back out there. Got a really big crosswind, so it's making getting the rigs nice and tight a little bit tricky. It's dropped off a little bit, so as I say, I'm going to take an opportunity in the lull in the wind to get these 3 rods back out there. Right, so keeping our eyes peeled on the lake. Luke, the eagle-eyed cameraman, is an actual fact seen a fish show about 50-60 yards out, so I'm going to wind one of those in. Got a couple of solid bags tied, chuck it in the general area, hopefully a bit of pulling power, a bit of liquid in the bag, and hopefully we can scratch our first bite. So waste no time, we'll get a bag looped on and out there. Well, last night was a rather fresh one, and it was no surprise. First thing this morning, we've had our first bite. Nice 20-pounder by the looks of it. Went through one of the other rods, so brought all three of them in. Little refresh with the hook baits, get them back out there and a little bit more bait, and hopefully this morning we'll have a couple more to show you. There we have it. It's taking a little bit longer than I anticipated. Just before first light, we've had our first bite. A lovely Naseby fish. Real character this one, but absolutely mint. Probably mid-20. Be honest, the conditions really weren't looking very favourable. Going into last night, it dropped really cold. We'd had a really bright day with high pressure. Had an easterly wind the last day or so. So if I'm honest, I knew it was potentially going to be a bit of a struggle. But this one's come and saved my bacon. So the first of hopefully a couple more. But yeah, cracking 𝘃𝗵𝗶𝗀. Get this one back, bit more bait out there, get the rod sorted, and hopefully another one will follow shortly. Happy days. So on this session, I've been fishing out at range. There's a number of things that I feel you need to take into consideration, again, when you're fishing at long range. On these large venues, often he who fishes the furthest or the most effective at range is often the one that reaps the rewards. Now, first and foremost is your hardware. It goes without saying, you're going to need the hardware that's capable of doing the job. So I'm using an Amplify spotter marker rod and 3 13-foot Amplify fishing rods. Now, they're a real pokey bit of kit, but I'm going to need that. I'm going to be fishing with big leads. So we've got a big easterly wind, so there's a big undertow, and ultimately to hold the leads out there at range, I'm going to need a 4-ounce lead. Got the ACR 12,000s there, and they're spooled up with our 12-pound outline camo reel line. Now it's nice and thin, it's 0.31, but again, I'm not scrimping on the strength there. 12 pounds, still more than strong enough. I'm fishing up to the tree work, so I need a bit of peace of mind. I can safely extract the fish. On there, I've got 50-pound Shoctite leader again. Helps with the casting. That braid, it doesn't stretch, so you get the maximum compression out the rod. You get the leads out there with ease. Got 4-ounce extremity distance leads on there again. They cut through that crosswind, they fly the furthest, and that's my choice. On the spod rod again, I got the 20-pound extremity spod braid. Again, another 50-pound Shoctite leader. When that spom's fully loaded, it's a real heavy bit of kit. Again, I need the peace of mind that I'm not going to crack off. Next up, might seem like a bit of a gimmick this, but I've got the bait station. And believe me, when you're putting loads of bait out there, it can be really hard work. The last thing I want to be doing is bending down. When I get into a rhythm, I want to be looking at the same tree. Don't want to take my eyes off it. I want to be putting the spod down the same hole time after time. So again, got a 17-litre bucket in there again, and I can have that fully loaded. It's nice and stable. Can have my finger stall on the side and a towel, again, keeping that rhythm. Next up is wrapping up. Now, it's vitally important, particularly on this session. I'm fishing up to trees. I want to be nice and accurate. I don't want to be going wayward, again, because I'll be ending up in the trees and not fishing safely. So my wrap sticks are absolutely imperative. I have them 12 foot apart, which is 4 yards, again, so I'm nice and consistent. Linking into that, I'm using marker elastic. Fishing just under 34 rod lengths, which is a fair old way. And the last thing I want to be doing is wrapping up time after time, particularly when the fish are on me. So I marker elastic my line, a foot from the tip. Again, I've not got to worry about it moving. Then if I get a bite and it's going through the alarm, it's out of harm's way. Being prepared, again, is super important. I've got a number of spare spools here with a 12-pound line. I've simply got to put a shock leader on there, and it's nice and easy. Now, the last thing, and arguably the most important thing, particularly on this session, is always well worth taking into account are the conditions. You don't want to start your session fishing as far as you possibly can for the weather to change. I mean, you can't effectively fish over your bait. At 34 rod length, no matter what the wind does, whether it turns into my face, I can fish out there nice and effectively, and it's not going to hamper my results. So there we have 5 tips for fishing out at long range. So there we have it. Bite just before first thing this morning. A little bit of fresh bait, went a little bit lighter on the bait this time, just 6 spods or so. And the right hand rod. Fishing right across those trees, so we've got bowstring tight lines and tight clutches. Couple of bleeps and we're in. So it's looking promising. I'll be honest, it was a really cold night. The wind's really not in our favour. It's blowing out of this shallow water. and I thought the fish had done the off, but would appear they're up for a little bit of a morning feed. Happy days, that's a promising start that to the morning. Another nice 20-pounder. There we have it, number 2. Not quite as pretty as the first, but on a cold spring morning like today, I'll take what I can get. Proof in the pudding, that bait, and that faithful D-rig is doing the do. As I say, I think one thing to take from this session is to persevere now. The conditions are far from ideal, but a lot of us, we can't pick and choose when we go, so you've got to make the most of it. And as I say, have faith in what you're doing, the bait, the rigs, your location, it will come good in the end. So this is the second one. Hopefully there'll be a couple more to follow, but if not, I'm more than happy with these 2 bites. Let's get this one back, a bit more bait out there again, and see what comes next. Right, so the session's rapidly drawing to a close. Those 2 fish first thing this morning. I'll be honest, I'm happy with that. The conditions have been far from ideal. Positioned down this shallow arm, and I just think with this cold easterly, I think they've backed off it. So, as I say, I'm more than happy with those 2 fish. So get the net holders in now, get the rods wound in, and get off home.